I want to give an example of what happened in Zimbabwe, Rutendo, where we had President Mugabe and then now a new President Mnangagwa. And during the era, the time of Mugabe, they took away land. And they thought that was a good thing. Good or bad, I don't know, highly debatable. But where is the country now? What was the advantage of such? Is it still working for the country?
So, as you heard me saying, I gave the history of how capitalism was created by primitive accumulation. Primitive accumulation in Africa became colonialism that took away land from the people. And when people do not have land, you are reliant on those that have land to provide food for the people.
Absolutely.
And so Zimbabwe was never going to develop as long as the land was in the hands of the same colonizer and the same settler that was occupying their land and colonizing them and wanting to create dependency in them. Zimbabwe was never going to prosper that way. So Zimbabwe had to deconstruct what the Israelites have done in the Bible, which is to take back your land so that you can be dependent on yourself. And you need to take 40 years within the desert to learn how it is to be self-sufficient people and people who believe in yourselves. And that's exactly what has been happening in Zimbabwe. And now we're starting to see Zimbabwe is wheat self-sufficient this year. And it's wheat self-sufficient this year, yet South Africa was last wheat self-sufficient in 1989. And we're going to probably be maize food self-sufficient this year. We've been out producing in terms of tobacco and other crops. That is a good thing because the Zimbabwean has learned how to use their land. They've learned how to produce. But what our government has got to understand is that that land doesn't have any meaning if that land is going to be infertile because of synthetic fertilizers that come from the West. We have to use fertilizers that make our land fertile, and those are organic fertilizers. We also will not be able to take our country forward if we're going to use seeds that do not belong to us or seeds that are actually reducing in virility. So we need to stop using genetically modified foods where Zimbabwe doesn't have them, but more critically, we also must not use hybrids. And the problem right now in Zimbabwe is that hybrids are taking over. But the problem with hybrids is they seem improved, they give you a yield, but they reduce in their virility over time until they stop reproducing. And that is a problem for food self-sufficiency. Because we will see that in Europe, there's a company called Lima Grain. In Zimbabwe, it is invested in a company called Seedco as Valmorin. Valmorin destroyed the tomato seeds of Europe by hybridizing them, to a point where when people buy tomatoes, they cannot take that same tomato and squeeze the seeds out to make it grow. The hybrids are also low in nutrition because what gives the hybrid a high productivity is hybrid vigor. That hybrid vigor reduces the nutrition within the food. Okay. And so that means that the food we're eating is less nutritious and then it can't reproduce, so you're always going to have to buy seeds. So what Vilmorin has done, or Lima Grain has done in Europe, is that they've become such a monopoly on seeds of tomatoes that they sell seeds in Europe for anything from 60,000 euros a kg to 400,000 euros a kg. If you put that in African terms, it means that we'll have to pay more than a kg of gold for seeds to produce tomatoes. And if we allow the rest of our food to be destroyed in Africa, we will then have the same situation that Lima Grain has created in Europe. So knowledge about this by our governments and them understanding that our traditional seeds is what we need so that our foods can be drought resistant. We also need to look at nature. This notion that scientists always know how to improve is not true, because nature shows us that nature in the bushes, in the Amazon, food is feeding trillions of animals without being hybridized, without being plowed, without being watered, without being farmed by human beings. But the moment human beings take seeds, they meddle with them. These seeds don't reproduce, they don't grow in droughts, they don't adapt to climate, they don't adapt to diseases. Then finally, our government has got to understand the need to use organic fertilizers. In Zimbabwe, we've got various types of organic fertilizers that have been there. The Americans went to war for what were called the Guano Islands. Guano Islands were islands that had birds that used to defecate on those islands, and that bird poop is what was the best fertilizer in the 1900s before the Rockefellers discovered oil. And it is out of oil and petrochemicals that the new fertilizers came, so they destroyed the use of guano, which America went to war to take guano islands in order to have organic fertilizer that if you put in the soil, it improves the quality of the soil, it makes the living organisms in the soil live longer, and the living organisms in that soil also eat the pests and bacteria that become your pests on your crop. So that kind of traditional type of food growing that was organic, that was made by nature and mimicked nature is what we need to do. And this scientific focus on trying to improve what it is that the Creator did will never work, because we don't know what it is that the Creator did. And I know I said finally, but this another thing is our governments must understand that the hybridization and the genetic modification of seeds can cause what is called the weaponization of seeds into something even more dangerous than nuclear weapons. So,
the weaponization, that's a very strong word.
Oh yes, because some of these seeds can be genetically engineered to actually produce toxins that can target certain RNAs that belong to certain ethnicities or certain races. It can also, right now there is a GMO that was created in 2002 already that actually had the gene of women who had a sperm killing mechanism within them. It's actually a disease where they kill sperm when it gets into them. So scientists went and took that gene that kills the sperm and put it into a maize crop so that maize crop would automatically make women have an ability to kill sperm when it gets into them to make them infertile. And this seed exists. It was patented in the United States. And these are the kind of weapons that we already have that can target certain ethnicities, can give them cancer, can give them, and so forth and so on.
And that's why we see the rise of all sorts of cancers right now worldwide.